Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel Coding with Bharat. This is the question which a lot of people have asked me previously as well. That okay, there is competitive programming, there are interview questions, right, pertaining to DSA. Which one should they focus on more, right? Which one are kind of most likely to be asked in interviews, right? So I myself have done competitive programming extensively. I'm a candidate master at Codeforces. I even have done Leetcode now these days quite extensively, and I'm fortunate enough to have cracked a few companies, right? So I feel like would be a good idea if I can shed some light on these topics and maybe go ahead from there. Maybe we'll take up one problem from Leetcode, one problem from Codeforces, and try to see what are the major differences here, right? So let's start with a very basic question that what are the companies trying to assess when they ask these kind of questions to the candidates, right? So, or what is problem solving that we say that they are looking for? So when we say problem solving and why do companies ask it, what they actually mean is that let's say they give you an abstract problem out there. So how are you able to break it down? How are you able to break it down into steps and go on and optimize from a very basic solution to a better solution, right? So let's say they have given you a problem A, right, which is a very open-ended problem. You first break down the requirements, get it to B, probably write some brute forces, right, which are C, and finally from those brute forces do the final optimization and take it further to the actual solution, right? So one important thing that a lot of people, a lot of candidates who are preparing miss out on is the fact that path here is very, very important, not just the final answer. Like, how did you arrive at this solution, right? It is not like knowing that, okay, there is a problem to sum which can be solved via two pointers, right? But why? Why is important. How did you arrive at that? Every decision that you take, the company can ask you what made you think that this could have been possible. Okay, so my advice here is generally to all the candidates that start with the simplest solution and then optimize. Okay, so problem solving is one thing that almost every company asks. Why? Because at the end of the day they want good problem solvers who can take their business problems and actually solve them in the most efficient way, right? So that is the main significant reason why these kind of questions are very common in interviews, right? So now coming to the next question, how do you go about learning these problem solving skills? So for that, I think this is a standard roadmap that you'll probably find almost anywhere in any video. So you learn a language, it could be either C++, Java, Python, whatever. Then you solve some simple problems so that you develop your normal problem solving bent of mind. And then you one by one go ahead and master each and every data structure and algorithm that is out there, right? So starting with something simple like searching, sorting, two pointers, bit manipulation, some simple data structures like stacks, queues, linked lists, and going on to complex topics like DP and graphs. Okay. So that is the standard. I think this is pretty much there in almost every video. If you want to check out the entire detailed syllabus, you can go to multiple websites, multiple videos, and you will be easily able to find it. Okay, so now we know that we need to learn problem solving, and for that we need to master problems or solve more and more problems on certain platforms which let us test our problem solving skills. So for that we have two kinds of website that are common, which are, one is a competitive programming focused websites like Codeforces, Codechef, right? They focus on the sport of competitive programming. So I'll talk more about what is CP in detail in the next as well. And second kind of platforms are more interview focused preparation platforms like Leetcode. Leetcode, there is Geeks for Geeks as well, there is IB as well, right? So two categories of major websites are present for you to practice these skills. Okay, so let me talk about what is competitive programming and is it even helpful. Like, we ultimately want to crack interviews. That is like almost everyone, most of the people, I have not say everyone, most of the people who go into this journey are generally going there for looking at the end result of cracking interviews, right? So competitive programming in general was meant like a sport, right? So it's a sport where you focus on coding speed, right? So you're given a problem, you have to code it as fast as possible You have to optimize it within reasonable limits, and you have to make sure that your solution gets submitted and get accepted in one go, right? So even if there are corner cases, then you are able to handle them well. So these are the three things on which this entire sport is based upon. So there are problems with the ratings, very similar to chess. If some of you have been playing chess, so you have puzzles given for a particular rating, right? So very similar to that, each problem has a rating, and as you solve more and more problems, you go above in rating and you're able to achieve certain levels, certain ranks. Like you start with newbie, you go to specialist, so on and so forth, right? So these are for Codeforces. Similarly for Codechef, you have 1 star, 2 star, 3 star, so on and so forth, right? So it is primarily as a sport which is present, and there are some contests to it as well. For example, ACM ICPC is a very famous contest in this competitive programming domain, right? Okay, but there are certain differences that need to be looked upon when we are going for interview. So first of all, in interviews, it is very important that people also focus on how clean your code is, right? So it's not just about writing any piece of code. It needs to be modular. You need to use functions. It needs to be readable. Like the person reading the code should be able to immediately understand, okay, this function does this, and this is how you are compiling your answer together, right? So yeah, super important to not just focus on speed of implementation. That is somewhat important, but more important than that is that your code is more readable, more clean. Apart from that, you have to efficient it to the next level. So in CP, if the problem passes the given test cases, it's all fine. But in an interview kind of scenario, there are no test cases. Rather than that, the interviewer would keep asking you to optimize it further, right? So even if your code is n log n, which n log n and n is no difference in most of the CP problems, but n log n versus n would be a major difference in an interview. Similarly, if your n solution uses 2 pass over a linked list over an array, the interviewer might say do it in 1 pass. If you are creating a map having some extra space, the interviewer might say remove that extra space for me, right? So all these different, you can say, further optimizations are actually very well possible when we are sitting for an interview specific problem, right? And that practice is generally with the Leetcode style problems, where you can look at people's solution, how they have optimized it even further, one level further, optimizing the space, time, one level further. Okay, cool. Okay, so before we move on to which is better, let me take up two problems. So the main difference, if I talk about the problems that are there in CP versus Leetcode style, in Leetcode style problem, I would say problems are more direct. So we'll take up one problem from Leetcode and try to solve it. What I'll do is very similar concepts. There was a recent contest of Codeforces where we had a different looking problem, and I'll see what are the extra steps that we are doing in this Codeforces problem. So that will give you a great idea about what is the difference in the kind of problems that are there in Leetcode and Codeforces. So let's start with the Leetcode problem. Yeah, this is a relatively easy problem picked from the easy section. So many of you might have already done it. So if you have, feel free to skip directly to the Codeforces problem. Yeah, if not, just stick around. So it says that, let's say we are given an array of distinct integers, right? So we have some integers in our array 4, 2, 1, 3. Now what we want to do is we want to find all the pairs of elements. So we need to find all the pairs that have minimum absolute difference between the two elements. So as an example, if I look at the pairs here, 4, 2, the difference is 2, absolute difference is 2. If I look at 4, 1, absolute difference is 3. 4, 3, absolute difference is 1. If I look at all such pairs and try to find the minimum absolute difference, then that is going to be 1. You can look into this array as well. That is going to be 1. So you have to find all the pairs that give you difference of 1. So what are all the pairs? It is 4, 3, it is 2, 1, and it is 2, 3 as well. So you can see that as well. So it says in the array we have 1, 2, right? Which is these two, 2, 3, and then 3, 4. So all the three pairs are there which have absolute difference of 1. Okay. So feel free to pause the video for a moment and think for yourself what could be the solution for it. Like you should be able to ideally come up with a solution here. Okay, great if you were able to do, great if you are not able to do. So what simply we can do is we can probably run two loops. So what I can do is I'll say for int I equal to 0, I less than array dot size I plus plus, and again run another loop j equal to I plus 1, j less than array dot size j plus plus, and then if the absolute difference is equal to the maximum minimum possible difference till now, I can probably keep on storing them. If I get a smaller difference, I can update the difference and just store this new value, right? So similarly, like checking every pair, finding the difference. If the difference is same as the minimum achieved so far, this is also one of the pairs. If we get a new minimum difference, we clean up whatever we had so far, and this is the new pair that we have for our solution. So that kind of solution can be easily written up here. Okay. So if you look at this solution where we are testing every pair, then that is actually going to be n square, right? So if I talk about the time complexity of this, it is going to in fact be n square because we are going over all the pairs. Okay. Now think about it. When I'm looking at this one, let's say one is one of my element that I'm looking at, and I'm comparing 1 and finding its difference with 2, 3 and 4. So 1 minus 2 is 1, 1 minus 3 is 2, 1 minus 4 is 3. Absolute terms, right? So if I carefully look at it, I am not concerned about 1, 3 and 1, 4 because they are going to have more difference than 1, 2, right? So if I go to probably a simple whiteboard, let's say I have some numbers, multiple numbers. Okay, and let's say there is a 1. So my question is, do I need to compare and find difference of this 1 with every number out there? So answer is no. What I'll probably be concerned with is just greater than this 1, probably 2, if not 2 then 3, whatever is the next, like the smallest just greater number than this 1, and probably just smaller. So for example, if there is minus 1, right? Why? Because for further numbers, let's say 4, the difference is definitely going to be more than this difference, which is 1. So will they ever be the minimum absolute difference? The answer is no. Similarly, for further numbers here, let's say minus 5, the difference is obviously going to be more than the closest number. So again, they would never be the answer. So this gives us an idea that maybe considering the elements in sorted order would help us, right? So what I'll do, I'll just sort the array. So I get 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I can in fact look at every pair, just the adjacent ones, find the difference. If it's equal to the absolute difference, then keep them. Otherwise, if it's new minimum absolute difference, just keep them and remove everything else we had collected so far and finally return the answer, right? So idea remains the same. Earlier we were doing n square comparisons. Now based on this optimization, we have reduced the number of comparison to O of n, right? So n square to O of n. So this is what you are expected in a Leetcode style problem. So if I summarize it, in a Leetcode style problem, first, your statement is pretty clear. Generally, statement is super clear that, okay, this is what you need to do, right? You don't have to go around beating around the bush, right? And trying to find what exactly the problem wants you to do, right? So there is no story behind it. There is no English that you have to decipher and come up with a way, right? So first thing is statement is clear. What is expected is you translate the statement to a simple solution. Let's call them A. And then you optimize this A into certain B, which is the optimal one. That is essentially the expectation in a Leetcode style problem for most of the times, right? In this part, I advise everyone to use copy pen, right? Do some test case analysis, use a copy pen, take a generic case, try to find, okay, from this statement, how can I come up with a very simple A solution, right? Then in the last step also, I generally say, if it's an observation like this, the above, that okay, some of the comparisons are useless, then that observation actually comes only when you try to write on copy pen and try to see what extra or what inefficiency are we making in this solution, right? So yeah, so simple idea with lead code problems, this is how it is. Okay, let's focus now on a Codeforces problem, which you would see that has a very similar solution, but would seem a lot more complicated than this problem, right? So let's go ahead and look at our second problem from here, which is the Codeforces problem. It was from a recent contest, recent C problem. So yeah, let's just go over it. So it says that there is a person. So first of all, there's a story that you need to decipher. So there's a person that is there. So it says that that person needs to send n messages at these moments, m1, m2, m2, m3, right? So in Leetcode style, it would have been given that there is an array of size n, but here it says there are n messages that this person needs to send at these time. Okay, now it says, unfortunately, at the moment 0, his phone has only f units of battery left. So if I look at his phone at the 0th moment, it has only f units of battery left. Now what happens? Further it says that this phone loses a units of charge for each unit of time it is on. So if for one particular complete second the phone is on, then it uses a units. Otherwise, at any moment, what Stephen can do is he can turn off this phone and turn it on at some later stage, right? So if he turns on at, let's say, moment X and opens it up in Y, so entire X to Y, he would just be spending B units of energy. Okay, so there are two ways to go from A to B. One way is we keep the phone on. If we keep the phone on, then going from X to Y, for all moments from X to Y, that is Y minus X moments, Y minus X plus 1 moments actually, the phone will be on. So the result would be Y minus X plus 1 into A. Whereas if the phone is turned off at X moment and it opens up at Y, then the total energy spent would just be B, right? So that is what essentially the question says, that you have two options. Either you keep the phone on throughout, then you'll spend the number of moments into 8 battery, or you switch it off at this point, open it up at this time, and then you will just be spending B units of battery. Okay, this translates to what I have said. What I have said is a much simpler form of it, that we have two options between any moment X and Y, either to keep it on or to off and then on at this point, right? Obviously there are other possibilities. We like keep on switching on off, switching on off, but that will only make sense in certain cases, and that you can think about when. Okay, so now it says that you want to send all these messages at the given times, so your phone must be on at that particular time, and you want to do it in such a way that your units of charge do not expire. Like if they reach 0, then your phone will switch off and you don't have a charger as of now to charge it. Okay, so that is what the story behind the question is. You need to tell whether it's possible or not to send all the messages, etc., right? Okay, at the crux of the question, let's look at the crux of the question. So I'll probably go again back to the drawing board. So let's say we need to send messages at moments 1, 3, 7 and 15. That means our phone needs to be switched on at 1, 3, 7, 15. And we already know at time equal to 0, the phone was on. Right? Phone was on at 0. It needs to be on at 1, 3, 7, 15. Okay. So here it's on, here it's on. Between 0 to 1, we have two options. Either we can switch the phone off at 0 and switch it on at 1, send the message, and that's it, right? So if we do that, that means at the moment 0, the phone was not on. The phone was actually turned off. So we'll be spending just B units of battery. Whereas if we keep it on throughout the 0 moment and then go to the first moment, then we will be spending A units of battery. Okay, let's do a similar thing for 1, 2, 3. Now, phone is on at 1. We need to have it on at 3. So there are two ways. Either we keep the phone on throughout 1, 2, 3. So in that case, for moment 1, for moment 2, we'll be having the phone on. So we'll be spending 2 into A units of battery. Remember, we are not counting 3 here. We are just counting 1 and 2 because for 3, the decision will be based on when we want to go from 3 to 7 because third moment has yet not ended, right? So 2A for 1 and 2 moment, or B. If we turn it off at 1 and turn it on at 3, then we would be spending either of the two. Similarly, we can go on and do for remaining. So if we talk about 3 to 7, you pause the video for a moment and try to do it for yourselves. Okay, I think most of you would have gone through. So 3, 4, 5, 6. So 4 moments are there. So either 4A or P. So can I say it is equivalent to array I minus array I minus 1. So 7 minus 3, which is 4 into A or B. One of these two. So do you see the similarity with the previous problem? Need to look at adjacent elements. Find the difference into A or B. Whichever is the minimum, add it to the answer. Again, important here, the phone needs to be on in consecutive elements, right? There also, in consecutive elements, we are finding differences. Here also, in consecutive elements, we are finding difference. And on top of that, doing some computations to get our result, right? So, yeah, but the difference, the two major difference between this problem and that problem is, first, the statement is pretty unclear. You need to actually drill down what the problem is asking you to do. You need to figure out the mathematical formulation for it. You need to make sure in copy pen that you actually take a test case, try to figure out what is the question trying to say and what is the how do we go about doing it and forming the simple solution out of it, right? So I would say in the Leetcode steps, an extra part, a step 0 is added here, which is understanding the problem, understanding the English behind the problem, right? Trying to convert it into a simple problem statement of Leetcode style. And then the process remains same. Rather, I would say the optimization can stop even a little beforehand in a lot of Codeforces questions, right? So yeah, another difference is a lot of Codeforces problems are at times mathematical in nature. So yeah, in Codeforces kind of or Codechef kind of problems, a lot of times there is a good amount of maths involved, which is relatively less, I would say, in Leetcode. So if you struggle with maths in general, by the way, like knowing maths is a good idea as a computer scientist. Like I would really advise everyone to brush up on their PNC, brush up on their probability and a little bit of calculus. These three fields are actually very important for computer engineers, computer scientists, right? So I would advise go for maths, like learn them a little bit if you are weak in it. But on the brighter side, I would say a lot of Leetcode problems are not that mathematical in nature. The solutions are more like what loops you write and then what optimizations that you do on those loops further. Okay. So that is a second difference between Leetcode and Codeforces. First being, statements are pretty clear in Leetcode. They could be sometimes hidden, like the simple statements hidden in Codeforces and Codechef. Second, mathematical nature of the problems. Okay. Now let's come to the another question, which is which then you should do, right? So should you focus on CP at all? Like if it's not something which is asked in interviews, why do you focus on it, right? So my advice here is CP is a very, like, one, I would say, one of the best tools to actually make you a good problem solver, because you're looking at an abstract problem, not, I would say, very similar to a real world customer problem. Customer problems would be more centric around edge cases and corner cases, but some problem, and you are converting that English problem into some computer science or mathematical formulation, right? And then using it to solve it. So learning competitive programming is a good idea. Simultaneously, when you have less time, focusing on DSA and focusing on other subjects, core CS subjects, clean coding, all of that is actually also very important. So my advice generally goes like this, that if you have time, yeah, if you're in first year, second year, those kind of places, and then there would be nothing as helpful as CP, because doing these raw problems, you will actually uh, put your problem solving bent of mind in place, right? And you might not even need to do lead code that much, like barring a few problems which are very, like, you would say patterns which are very specific to lead code. You might not even need to touch it that much. And that is what actually happened with me as well. Like, I'd been doing computer programming since, I think, second semester. So by the time I reached the time of my internship, I had to do fewer things than what a lot of people who had not started had to do, right? So if you are in first or second year, just go ahead and do CP. If you are in third or fourth year and have less time, have the placements coming, then I would say covering topics for interview is more important. Focusing on lead code style optimizations are more important, right? So those, writing clean code is more important. So focusing on overall lead code and letting go of CP as of now seems to be a better idea here. Okay. One last piece of advice. Never go for shortcuts, right? So let me tell you my personal anecdote. I've given multiple interviews during my internship times. I was fortunate to get offers from a lot of them, out of which I joined Tower Research, which is kind of like one of the was one of the highest paying companies at that time. Even at this time, I had given a lot of interviews, right? So none of the interviews actually asked me direct named questions. None of them said me that, okay, solve the knapsack problem, or let's say solve the longest increasing subsequence problem, right? So those kind of problems are not there. They're not asked, right? So what is asked are new problems. Okay. Now someone might say that, okay, those new problems would also be available in some time. Yes, but they can also change it. There could be infinite problems that could be made. Even if right now a company doesn't know that its problems are public and is still going on with some repeated problems. But do you want your chances to rely on that luck factor, that you will be given a problem which you had already seen, right? So I don't see the sense. Like, more important than that, to become a better, you can say, computer engineer, you need to be good at actual problem solving, right? So just taking these shortcuts, these cheat sheets, like, according to me, doesn't make that much of a sense. Okay. So let me talk about my personal experience. None of them asked me the named problems, barring one company. Again, that one company in about, I would say, 15-20 companies that would have interviewed me, right? So yeah, just one probably would have asked that kind of a question. Okay. So focus was majorly on how I optimize code, how to write clean coding. Some of them even asked me to wrap the code in classes to make sure that the code is modular, right? Understandability of the code. If they did not understand one portion, they would ask me, can I make it a little more better in terms of readability? Can I put some comments so that it is clear, right? Time and space complexity, these kind of things were very important. Additional focus, since I had 5+ years of experience, obviously was on concurrent code, writing code with concurrency, synchronizations, all of that. A little bit of system design, like not little bit, but actually good amount of system design, and little bit of low level design patterns and design principles that I had to follow. So that was because I had 5 years of experience. If you are a fresher or just starting, I guess that is when you would be watching this video, considering it's about competitive programming, which none of the major senior people right now do, right? So for you guys, the advice would be that if you're in first second year, do cp well, so that you are so well prepared by third year that you just have to do little bit of time on lead coding. If you are in third or fourth year, your internship or placement seasons are coming, maybe it's a good time to switch gears and cover the breadth of topics if you have not done so far. Okay, give contests, absolve them, try to make sure that at least one more submission you do from what you were able to do in contests. Great. So yeah, I think let me know in the comments if this was sensible, this kind of thing was sensible to you. If you have some questions that you want me to answer in such videos, do let me know again in the comments, right? Do like, to subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends, right, who would be struggling with this kind of thing. And yeah, keep preparing. Very, very all the best for however you are preparing, right? Okay, bye bye.